Well, he is calling the shots, John, but the point is, I think Iran wants a deal because I think they've looked out there and said, we get a nuclear weapon, what good is it going to do us? The Turks get it, the Egyptians, the Saudis?
If they want a deal, they want a fig leaf deal that preserves the essential capacity, that preserves their ability to do whatever they want in secret, and they can break out at any time, at the same time to get sanctions relief.
Why did the intelligence community of the United States declare twice on high confidence that Iran is not building a nuclear
you think
weapon?
This is about medical research, Pat? This regime is so devoted to medical progress.
It's all 17 intelligence agencies.
Peaceful nuclear energy.
Look, a lot of fellows and neocons and others want a collision and a war with Iran. They would like to see these talks collapse. And you watch Congress call for new sanctions and try to gut the talks. If
you stall their program for an indefinite period, I think that's still a pretty good deal. If you got all these politicians standing up and saying if they're going to go, if we think they're going to go for a weapon, therefore we're going to have to go to war, that's not a very good alternative. So diplomacy
is it is not a good alternative if they develop the capacity to have nuclear weapons either. It's going to transform the whole region of the world where we have enormous national interest.
Should we go to war to stop that?
I don't think we should go to war under any circumstances unless we feel there's a major threat.
Iran wants to consolidate its nuclear program.
Of course,
and it's playing for time to do it.
Exactly. They've been
is that what's going on?
They've been investing a huge amount of time, a huge amount of resources.
From a nuclear weapon
think they're doing
now than they were 6 months ago if they're building one.
Enough of Iran. Iran will be around for a while. Let's shift the Middle East focus to Gaza, where Israel has launched a ground offensive against Hamas. What are Israel's objectives? Mort, speak to that.
Well, Israel's objectives are fairly simple, okay? They want to make sure that they are, and the first objective is to make sure that they aren't going to be attacked by missiles that are launched against them, and they've had hundreds and hundreds of them launched against them with various kinds of weaponry capabilities. That's the first thing. The second thing that they want to make sure of is that Gaza does not remain a platform for continuous attacks on Israel. That the most important thing for them is to make sure that that is not a threat to their country, and they've already had it.
That is correct as to what their objective is: degrade the missiles. I think also take care of Hamas leadership. But this is a diminishing return that the Israelis are getting, because all over the world, including the United States, the pictures of what is happening to civilians in Gaza, hundreds dead and over 1,000 wounded, is causing a tremendous uprising in the Arab street and much of the Western world.
There's much greater understanding this time that those are the pictures that Hamas wants. That's why Hamas bases its operation in densely populated areas exactly so civilians will die, and exactly so they can try to rally international. Well, why are they shooting the rockets?
The United States had a program which Israel agreed to and which Hamas did not agree to basically bring this to a halt. Okay?
Gaza is about the size of Philadelphia with almost 2 million people. The whole place is densely populated. And if Israel wants to destroy Hamas, and I think that is their goal, they've been doing these periodic bombings. They call it going in, they call it mowing the lawn. It's not working.
Eleanor,
so they need to think
Hamas
another strategy, and giving the people who live in this densely populated area some access to the outside world, some ability to live.
They left 10 years ago unilaterally. They left the greenhouses all in place. They wanted to give them the chance to create a decent policy. Instead, you have another failed terror state that's launching hundreds of rockets.
They've had 3,000 greenhouses that the Israelis left over for them, and they burned them and destroyed them.
Thank you.
Iraq wants 6 months, and we're willing to give them 3 months. That's where the talks are.
I don't know exactly where the talks are, to be honest with you. I'm not sure that that's exactly where the talks are.
Iran, this is one place where I'm optimistic about what Kerry is doing, for the reason I think the Iranians really want a deal.
And Kerry,
they want to get.
You should be optimistic about what Kerry is doing, because Kerry is Kerry. He's good.
Well, Kerry did a good job.
Question: will the Iran-U.S. nuclear dialogue be extended? Pat Buchanan.
It certainly will, John.
Yes, and kudos to Kerry for getting the agreement in Afghanistan to count the votes.
It'll be extended because the Iranians want to string it along, and the administration's desperate for a deal.
Issue 3, Arc of Instability. In an enterprising piece of reporting, 2 Wall Street Journal correspondents, Jay Solomon and Carol Lee, interviewed U.S. and foreign officials and foreign policy experts about the, quote, arc of instability, unquote, currently convulsing the planet and its impact on President Obama's options.
You had the Arab Spring. You've had the rise of these really, crazy militant groups in Iraq and Syria. You've had the Syrian civil war. You've had the strengthening of China and Russia's foreign policy and Iran. So he's had a real difficulty of managing what he ran on and what he was elected on in a world where there are many different competing powers.
From the Russian-Ukraine crisis to the military coup in Thailand to the wars raging across the Middle East to the fight against the Taliban in Afghanistan, it doesn't take an expert to recognize growing worldwide jitters and instability. Scan the inside of today's newspaper and check out the stories that feature conflict as obscure as Nigeria's infighting with Boko Haram, territorial disputes over remote Asian islands, open warfare on Europe's threshold, and now renewed hostilities between Palestinians and Israelis. President Obama campaigned on diplomatic engagement with Iran and with Russia, and more broadly American military retrenchment, especially pullbacks from Iraq and Afghanistan, and a disinclination to use military force, as he vividly demonstrated with his memorable Syrian red line against chemical weapons. Some critics of President Obama say that his prudent retrenchment has morphed into something else, dangerous disengagement. And this has bloomed into the American zeitgeist, inadvertently maybe, encouraging global mischief makers, and so creating an arc of instability.
Question: has President Obama's foreign policy made the world less stable? Eleanor Clift.
Well, I did read that article, and I did note that with the exception of a quote from Brian Katulis, who was involved with the Democratic administrations at the end, saying the world is yearning for a quarterback to call the plays, and President Obama hasn't fulfilled that role. They quote mostly Republican critics, and most of these critics do not say what they would do instead. Nobody's advocating putting troops on the ground anywhere. Nobody's making the case for an air war. There's lots of people complaining, but nobody seems to have any great ideas about what to do. And the notion that all of these instances are somehow connected is ludicrous. I mean, what's happening in Gaza doesn't have anything to do with what's happening in Ukraine. And so, suggesting that if President Obama were tougher and was more, swaggering on the world stage, somehow these events would not flare up, I think is actually ludicrous.
Do you think it can be blamed on the economy? 5 years ago, the world was plunged into the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The social impact has had huge political impact. Anti-incumbency in democracies, revolution in autocracies, competition over resources and jobs from trade wars and currency wars to escalating military tension. There, I've answered my own question, haven't I?
I have that feeling.
Do you think that this is a valid explanation?
I think it's a part of the explanation, but I think by far the more important part is the fact that the United States has lost a great deal of credibility as the leader of the free world. And this president has particularly, the symbol of it all was when he made this commitment on Syria and then walked away from it, okay? Right. This would have to end, he said, and then he wouldn't act on it. So he's lost an enormous amount of credibility, certainly in the Middle East. And not just in the Middle East.
Rich.
Well, Eleanor's right. Obviously, a lot of these events are sui generis, but Mort's also right. The unifying theme is U.S. weakness, and it's amazing. You look around the world, and it's very hard to come up with any place where our interests have been advanced over the last 6 years or where our alliances are stronger, and that's just an extraordinary thing.
Well, Pat, do you want to say something?
What you're seeing, quite frankly, is the end of global Western empire. Just like when the British Empire went down, all these explosions all over the world. The United States is coming home from the world, and we're seeing the consequences of it.
Do you think we're in a neo-isolationist, Switzerland-like mood?
No, I don't think you're isolationist in terms of, I think what America wants to be involved in the world, but it doesn't want to go in and fight these wars that are none of our business.
Predictions, Pat.
Governor Rick Perry has attacked Rand Paul's isolationism. He's been echoed by John McCain. He's been echoed by Dick Cheney. He's been echoed by the neoconservatives. What this tells me, John, is that foreign policy, the so-called isolationist neocons or the realists versus the interventionists, this is going to be a major issue in the Republican primaries in 2016, and I think it's really a healthy thing.
Is Rand Paul winning?
I think when everybody's attacking him, as Nixon said, when you hear about everybody getting together to stop X, put your money on X.
Eleanor.
But most elections are bread and butter elections, and the unemployment rate is going to fall below 6% by this November, which may brighten the mood a little bit for voters going to the polls. That means the unemployment rate has dropped from 7.5 over the last year to its 6.1 now. And while it may not take effect by this November, an improving economy could set the election up for Democrats. I know Mort is going to disagree, but actually things are looking better.
So you think
finally
Obama's going to score, huh?
I do.
And they're going to keep the
He's going to be
Democrats
vindicated.
Keep the Senate too?
He's going to be vindicated despite the Republicans not letting him have any of his policies.
Okay. What do you think?
Everyone's focused, John, on this impending John Boehner lawsuit over the employer mandate delays in Obamacare, where the real judicial earthquake that is going to happen has to do with this case that's been brought because Obamacare says you only get subsidies if the state has set up the Obamacare exchange. And then when dozens of states didn't set up the exchanges, the administration said, oh, forget what's in the law. We're going to pronounce from on high that you get the subsidies even if the federal government sets up the exchanges. There's going to be a decision probably within days that's going to strike this down. It's going to be an enormous reaction.
Well, that's good. That's a good prediction and quite lengthy. Mort, I'll give you 15 seconds.
Okay, I'm going to just point out the fact that the unemployment rate is going down because they're counting part-time jobs as if they were full-time jobs. We have 47 million part-time jobs, and all of the jobs that were created when we had 288,000 jobs were part-time jobs.
President Obama's attended 2 political fundraisers during the crisis over the airline passenger massacre in Ukraine will draw scrutiny to the amount of time he is devoting to politics instead of governing. He should have canceled the events and returned to Washington to manage the U.S. and the Allied response to the atrocity. Bye-bye.